Okay, so I'm not pregnant anymore. Had a miscarriage. Thursday, December 11th was my birthday. I turned 22, and that whole day I had a cold. I was really stuffed up and aching and tired. And that whole day I had been spotting some more, and it was different because it was almost like I was losing a mucus plug, like I did when I went into labor with my son, and it felt different. I knew something wasn't right, and it was ending. And so that night, Thursday night, Friday morning, around 2, my son had been waking up because he had a cold too, and he's in our room with us still because we only have one bedroom, and he had been waking up, and Cedric would get up with him, and around 2 I heard him kind of moaning and whining in his crib, and it woke me up, and I was feeling what I know now is was a contraction, because it was real dull and achy, but I was asleep, so I didn't really pay much attention to it. Cedric had been holding Gideon, and then he crawled into bed with the baby next to me, and right then I felt a pop and a gush of fluid, and got up and ran to the bathroom, and there was blood all over the place. And I just said, "Oh God." And Cedric came in, and blood scared him, so he was like, "What do you want me to do?" And okay, we need to go to the ER. And when I went back to the bedroom, I noticed that it had been my water that broke in the bed, and then blood immediately as I ran to the bathrooms. And so we went to the ER, and I had been having contractions all the way there for like 3 minutes apart, and I was shaky and stuff, so we went to the ER and walked in, and like, "Yeah, how can I help you?" I'm like, "I want a double cheeseburger. I'm having a miscarriage." And so I filled out the paperwork, and I'm contracting even more and bleeding, and they put me into the bed, and they were trying to put an IV in because I took my blood pressure and it was getting lower and lower, and so they were trying to find an IV, but I'm already a real tough stick. My veins like to hide, but then also I was dehydrated from loss of fluids, so they couldn't find a vein, and they poked me about 7 or 8 times on each arm. And finally, Nurse Linda, just by chance, stuck a needle in and got blood back, and it was in the vein. Just pure luck, because they started feeling my arteries to see if they could put an IV in either my neck or my groin. And I was like, "No, please." They put a liter of saline in, and they were kind of worried because when they took my blood pressure, they did it laying down, sitting, and then standing up. They took it 3 times. And when I stood up, blood just poured out of me, and my husband was sitting right there, and he was terrified. So they replenished the fluid I had lost, and my pressure was starting to go up, so then they put me in an ambulance. What happened first was they did an exam to make sure I was miscarrying, and the doctor was looking for, he was pulling stuff out of me, and they couldn't find the right forceps that they needed because this is a rural hospital, and they're tearing apart kits and the crash cart looking for anything that might work, and you can't find the right forceps. They needed these long ones that have the scissor part way low so that this part can get inside and do what it needs to do, but all they could find was one that goes in the intubation kit where if you have something stuck in your throat, it goes down your throat and grabs it and pulls it up, so it's shaped like this, with the forceps part like this. So he couldn't really get that inside of me to grab anything he needed to, and so they're like, okay, well, we tried the best we could, we're going to take you to Bakersfield, which is 45 minutes away, to, you know, see if you need a DNC or whatever. So they shipped me off. That was a bumpy ride, and I'm still contracting, and it wasn't so bad. I, you know, breathed through the pain and everything, and it just passed. And this all started at 2 a.m., and we left for Bakersfield around 6. We had my son with us in the stroller. Cedric was watching him, and then we called one of our friends and told them that I was miscarrying around 4 a.m. and they, no questions asked, came and got Gideon, so that was really nice of them. And so they kept him that day and that night also, while we were at the hospital. And so we got to the hospital. Cedric followed behind in the trooper, and we got there 7:30ish, and they wouldn't let Cedric in the room with me until 8, visiting hours or whatever. You know, they checked my pressure and all my vitals, and they said, okay, well, we're just gonna have you here and wait until the doctor comes to do an exam. So we waited a few hours, and then they took me back into the exam room and made me wait another entire hour in that room. Meanwhile, I had a catheter in me. I've had that put in up here at the rural hospital. I don't know how many of you have ever had Foley catheter. It's not that fun. It doesn't feel good when it's in you, and when you move it at all, it burns like a UTI. And then that made me contract whenever it would move. So I'm sitting in that room waiting and waiting and waiting, and Cedric is exhausted, and he doesn't even get to lay down. I get to lay in a bed, and he doesn't even get to. He's just really frustrated with everybody, and so he goes out, and apparently some more traumas came in, so they were backed up. The doctor finally came in and did the exam, and the nurse was really nice. She was looking at me like she didn't know what to say, and just like, sorry, honey. At that moment, I wasn't devastated or anything. I'm still really not, because the whole pregnancy didn't feel right to me. I didn't feel pregnant. I kept forgetting I was pregnant, and I never really bonded with the pregnancy, nor with the baby. Something wasn't right with this pregnancy. So anyways, they finished that exam, and they said, okay, we're going to send you to ultrasound to see if we need to do a DNC. So we waited another hour, and they took me back. They were going to make me get up and get in a wheelchair to go back there, but the transport guy was like, no, just keep her in the bed, we'll just wheel her back there. And so that was nice, because getting up and walking to a wheelchair and then sitting with a catheter in you is no fun. So they wheeled me back there, and Cedric couldn't come into the ultrasound room with me. I don't know why not, but they made him wait in the waiting room. And she said, okay, first we're going to fill your bladder up, and then we're going to do an ultrasound, and then I'll empty your bladder, and then we'll do an internal ultrasound. So I was like, tons of fun. And so she filled my bladder with, it was half a liter. It was a bag this big, like this, full of fluid into my bladder. So it was the maximum amount a bladder could hold. That was the most painful thing I've ever been through. It was more painful than delivering my son, because every time she'd press on me and it would hurt, it would make me have another contraction. And so it was just constant contraction, no break. That was excruciating.